I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it's VGC, the video game podcast, with me, Jordan Midler, Andy Robinson, and Chris Dring. This week, the Switch 2 rumor mill is in overdrive, and Concord is dead. But first, how's it going, folks? Chris, how are you?
I'm excited. I like your Linkin Park reference at the start.
Thank you.
It's a good, timely reference.
Yeah, that's what they're designed to be,
Yeah, very well done. Yeah,
I want to date this podcast as soon as possible. It's not enough that we're talking about news that is usually outdated in 3 days, but I'd like cultural references to be just as timely. You were saying that you're a big Linkin Park fan and also a Blink-182 fan. I didn't take you for, before I knew you personally, I didn't take you for a big mosher. How did that come about?
I was, kid in the early noughties, and the Linkin Park and Limp Bizkit and Blink-182 and Jimmy Eat World and stuff, and that was my scene. That was the I certainly, that you see me at a gig, you see a different side of me, and I'm quite hardcore as well. I'm down the front, but I was really excited by the Linkin Park news. You're talking about sort of being dated news. I did a podcast earlier this week, and I talked about Rocksteady having not made any layoffs. And then 30 minutes after you finished recording was the story. So I'll enjoy.
Well, let's hope they don't bring back Concord after this podcast.
All those people that have been spending the last 2 days trying to get the platinum, they've been like, "Oh well, there's clearly a great enthusiasm for it." Andy, you are back from Japan, listeners. This
Again?
is not a repeat. This is a new episode. You're back from Japan.
Yeah. So. It was a really, really cool trip for people who have been in the media for as long as I have. Like, they'll know that there's these like only come around so often. You get lots of trips, but it's very rare that you get like a trip to a great location to see a genuinely great studio and game. Like, it's usually one or the other, right? Like, you're going to Birmingham to see a great game, or you're going to Tokyo to see, a gacha thing. And I think about, like, over my career, I think I've been to like Bungie once, and, like Nintendo once. And like, these don't come around that often, and particularly now that it takes so long for them to release a game, right? So getting to go to PlayStation in Japan to see Team Asobi was excellent. Yeah, I've always wanted to. It's a studio I've always wanted to visit. So I think they're really, really interesting. Kind of work culture and setup there. It's fascinating. Their influence they take from being in Sony, around Sony. Sony Electronics Corporation. It was a brilliant trip, getting to learn about what is a now universally kind of acclaimed platformer.
It really broke my heart. It really stabbed 1,000 knives through my chest. Now that I've done this for like a decent amount of time, I don't really get that real like carnal jealousy anymore, but seeing you cutting about
so you remember all those, like when you went to Disneyland the first time,
which time
when I gave you and then I let you have the second one where you went to Disneyland, so twice got to go to Galaxy's Edge, like pre-opening as well, like private Galaxy's Edge. I've not been there. You must you should, if you didn't know already, you should have known that those were being queued up for one big repayment.
Oh yeah, it's all strategy.
Yeah, you enjoy your Disneylands because when the good one rolls around,
the privilege of being in charge.
I think honestly, I think that's the first press trip I've been on in like a decade. I was trying to think about it, like a proper press trip. Yeah. I've definitely missed one, but you got to keep in mind that we launched VGC 6 months before a global pandemic. So I mean, that's 2 years lost, maybe more if companies, kind of like their policies work over their kind of fiscal year or whatever. So I can't remember. There's going to be some PR who's really pissed off who took me on a trip like 2 years ago. Who's like, what do you don't remember? Yeah, because usually with VGC now we send ourselves to places, right? Like we go to, Tokyo Game Show or Summer Game Fest and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a blast from the past being taken to a studio by a publisher. This is a bit inside baseball again, actually, for people listening. That
people that listen to this podcast love that shite, apparently. So
good. But this is like, if you ever wondered why people in the games media whinge about how they earn no money, but they still like mostly stay and do it. It's because we get to go and do cool things. Like, you know, it's I learned this when I went into game dev for a couple of years, right? Like that we're so used to seeing interesting things and speaking to interesting people. It's you know, it's really engaging, you know, enjoyable job when you get to do that stuff, that you get to see the tip of people's icebergs, right? Like, I mean, I got to go to Team Asobi last week and see them. Here's our game and here's how we made it, blah, blah. But that's just the last 1% of their 3-year cycle, you know, where they're locked away and they don't speak to anyone. And, you know, they have to focus on what they're doing. Whereas we get to get the tip of everyone's icebergs.
Yeah.
You know.
Our jobs are too exciting. Yeah. We can't cope when we get a real job.
Well, I can't.
The last press trip I was on, I believe, was to go and see Concord. Speaking of, story number 1, Concord is dead. 2 weeks after being released, Concord has been pulled from sale and is no longer playable, with Sony issuing refunds to both the people who bought it. If you bought it digitally, you've already been refunded. If you bought it physically, what is wrong with you? If you bought it physically in the US, the GameStop Twitter account is actively making fun of you, which is an interesting approach to take. But this announcement was made in a blog post by Ryan Ellis, the game director at Firewalk Studios. Quote, Concord fans, we've been listening closely to your feedback since the launch of Concord on PlayStation 5 and PC. We want to thank everyone who's joined the journey above the North Star, which editorializing is the ship in the game. Your support and the passionate community that's grown around the game has meant the world to us. However, while many qualities of the experience resonated with players, we also recognize that other aspects of the game and our initial launch didn't land the way we'd intended. Therefore, we have decided to take the game offline beginning September 6th, which is today. They are exploring options, including those that will better reach our players. Chris Dring, when this came along, how did you feel? No, this announcement, because when this happened, I got a message on Discord that just said Concord dead, and I was like, what can they possibly mean by that? This feels pretty unprecedented.
It was an unprecedented. It was definitely unprecedented, right? I mean, the fact that it's a game that a live service game people to buy and nobody's playing it. I mean, the numbers are terrifyingly low. Like I remember when I was told how Immortals of Avium did last year, and I thought, there's no way a game sold that few numbers. It's that level of failure, right? And you can't have a multiplayer game with that few players, so you kind of have to refund people because it's a game they can't play. But it's interesting because I thought Sony cancelled a load of games earlier in the year, right? So they looked at their live service lineup, they looked at how the market shifted for live service, and they've gone, right, okay, that's not going to work, that's not going to work, that's not going to work. And I had to wonder why Concord wasn't one of those titles. And my assumption is that it was so far along in development, and of course, unlike Hyenas from Creative Assembly, which I guess is a similar situation, you know, Sony don't have to pay platform fees, they can get it, so they've got a load of own channels they can use to promote it. They probably thought they could do enough to get the game out and you know, at least sustain it for a bit. But yeah, it is. I know there was a press trip, you went on a press trip, but I noted at Summer Games Fest, Andy, you were there as well, that they didn't have, the game wasn't there, right? It was just they'd focused on Astro Bot, so I could tell that it perhaps wasn't their biggest title. But I mean, that's what I was going to say. That's level of failure.
The thing that I'm thinking about with all of this is that it's unprecedented. I mean, how long had the game been out? Had it been out a week?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, right?
11 days.
They're not like, I mean, people, the real smart people are working in these publishing teams, putting these games out, right? I mean, a lot of the time they'll hear the conjecture on our podcast here, where why is this, why is that? And, you know, maybe think that, you know, perhaps we're not quite as educated as them on this stuff, right? It's why we bring on Chris Dring to tell us the how the shops work. But they know, right? So they know. This is not something, oh, wow, it's suddenly no one's bought this. Everyone knew this was coming. I don't see a scenario where they thought, well, maybe it'll just be a hit. It felt calculated in a way that I guess you've suggested, that they're like, wow, it's basically done. We might as well just, you know, slop it out and, you know, maybe we can salvage something. But, you know, you knew this was going to be just the business model was wrong, the timing was wrong, even how they presented it to players. Like they announced it and what they did, like a small beta, and then they put it out. This game should have been in beta for like a year, right? They should have been in early access. They should have been designing this game with the community for a year. It just all seems so. I don't want to say avoidable, because obviously this kind of unique in the sense that it's very high production live service game, right? It isn't one of those early access Steam games. Everything in it does look fantastic, especially the cinematics and stuff like that. The production level here is very much AAA. So it is one of those big blockbuster tankers that you probably can't steer as easily. But I still it just feels like surely some of this was avoidable at some stage.
Yeah. It's one of those games where they commissioned it at a time when it made sense, right? And then as it got closer to launch, you get loads of these games where you go, actually, it doesn't work anymore. And sometimes, if you're having to pay 30% to Sony or Xbox, and you're having to pay for store placement on the Xbox store, the PlayStation store, you go, is it worth releasing it? Are we going to make any money back? And for Sony, obviously, they don't have that risk. So I think maybe if this was a Sega game or a Square Enix game, it wouldn't have made it this far.
And it feels,
it's a shame though.
Yeah, of course it is. Like I'm absolutely gutted for the people who are working on this. It's not their fault. Absolutely not. It's not their fault that Sony have decided to chase this kind of trend, and push this to a point was probably where it was unavoidable that this was going to happen. They've kind of done the best of their job. And from what I understand, I've not played it. It's not a terrible game.
No,
it's just unremarkable. You probably these days when you're investing in that sort of title, it's a big investment, right? So I'll pick. It's not like, imagine if it's a single player game. I'll pick that up and give it a go. Yeah, like it's not. It doesn't seem remarkable, but it's my sort of thing, and I enjoy it. It's not the same kind of purchase decision when it's a live service game, because it's like, yeah, it seems like my sort of game, but it's going to absorb all of my time. It's going to be such an investment. If I do that, it needs to be something that is better than all the other things in my life that take up my time, my Netflix and my sports and all the rest of it.
The challenge these games have is the people they speak to are already playing a live service game, right? Or multiple live service games. And they have invested maybe months, years in these games. They've got their characters up to a certain level. They've got their friendship groups and stuff. So when you're going, hey, come and play R1, you might be able to convince them for a bit to give it a go, but they will always go back to the game where they've got their character up to a certain level. And it's really, really hard to break into that top echelons of sort of, you look at the top 10 most played live service games, it's the same 10. It's been for years and years and years. Even when you get a Helldivers 2 or an Among Us that breaks in every now and again, eventually it falls away. I mean, they might, you get to a level where they can still be sustainable. But it's I did a tweet which said this, live service games have a much bigger commercial ceiling on it. If you can make a live service hit, you can make more money in a month than a game like Spider-Man will make in its lifetime, right? If you can have a live service hit. But obviously the chance of having that's very, very, very slim. Single player games are equally risky, but the chances are you might be able to make your money back on it, even if it doesn't hit. There's a chance, you have an opportunity.
I guess that's another big shock for me is that they've just what circumstances behind the scenes contribute to just giving up after 2 weeks. I mean, I know they've said like, oh, we're going to look at, they've kind of hinted that they might kind of look at, repurposing it in some way, but it sounded very Anthem, like EA said that, and it's like, yeah, that sort of seems like you're letting us down gently. Why, it's just mad to me. Like, you just
put it into PS Plus.
Yeah, give it a year and just repurpose it. Give the team on it for a year repurposing this, because it's also the other thing that I think people forget with live service games as well, especially all the big ones, is that pretty much all of them are like heavily flawed at launch, right? Destiny was not a great game at launch. It was very, very flawed at launch. And they just struck to it. It took a couple of expansions before Destiny was truly great. And it's probably true of a lot of live service games, right? You just get them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got nothing to build on. They don't have a player base to build on. That's the thing. They don't. They have. It's and they've sold this to people, right? The people have bought this and they've gone, right, I can't find any players to play with, so they have to sort of go back to the drawing board, I think. And they say it is a thing. But PlayStation's got a challenge. People, we don't talk about this enough. Is that the games industry is going through this thing where video games are costing more and more and more money to make, right? And that's because wages went up twice. There was a big war for talent, a real battle for staff during the pandemic, which causes everyone to raise their salaries. And then there was the cost of living crisis, which also caused a massive business cost increase. So the cost of making video games is now huge, and it's taking longer to make games as well. And the cost of a video game is people plus time, and time is taking longer, and these games cost a huge amount of money. You saw the budgets for Spider-Man 2; it's huge. So these games are costing so much money to make, but actually the return, then the audience for them isn't getting bigger. And so you look at a company like Sony that doesn't make live service games normally, and they're going, our games are costing a lot more money to make, and they're not making a lot more. So that's why they've increased the price of games, $70. That's why they're doing things like they're putting the games into movies and TV shows to try and expand the IP, make them bigger. That's why they're putting their games on PC. But the big bet for them is like, can we pivot back to multiplayer? I like that people talk about this sort of multiplayer strategy is new for Sony. They used to make multiplayer games all the time.
Wasn't it action game? Come on now.
Wasn't it a thing? I mean, I remember being told like a good 10 years ago that the reason they didn't do that was because, all of the big multiplayer games, they played them on PlayStation anyway, right? So they were making their cut from Call of Duty, etc. So it's like, well, we'll stay out of their lane and we'll do what at the time the third-party publishers didn't want to do. We'll do the single-player games.
Yeah. But if you look at the direction of travel with the platform business, right, which is moving away from the idea of the console, it's you sit there and think, as Sony, you need to prepare, you need to build your studio business. You need to make sure you've got that strong studio business. So I can see why they're doing it. I mean, my first game, one of the first projects I ever worked on before as a games journalist was Warhawk. So they've always done it, but and I think it's the right move for them to make live service games, but they've got to do it in a Sony way. They've got to differentiate. I think Helldivers 2 was a bit PlayStation-y. In the way that game was.
Again, I do wonder if it's funny you mentioned Helldivers 2 as well, because you combine that with Astro Bot. I wonder if it will send any shockwaves through the business. I mean, Astro Bot's not going to sell loads, but in terms of how they're both made, it's a very different approach. You look at a Concord and you look at these two games; they're very iterative, experimental. They're very agile. They're fast. I mean, you look at like Helldivers; it's very much like they got it out. And then kind of built on top of that. Whereas Astro Bot again is a game made where they prototype again, with a very small team, probably very low risk.
They do this though. Sony's always had I just did a piece on GI about expand-alone games, and PlayStation actually used to do this a lot, right? Where they take a game, they make a new one in 2 years. It's not a full sequel. So Miles Morales is a great example. Miles Morales, new team. It wasn't the main Spider-Man team. They smashed it out in 2 years. Genuinely great, not as big as or expansive as the main Spider-Man game, but it's brilliant. Sold 15 million copies. It's like you go sit there and go, well, you don't need to spend huge amounts of time and energy. Some people can, all right. So you've got this on the one hand, do something experimental and different and a bit weird with a small team like Astro Bot, and you've got these examples of do something that's a bit AAA but shorter and tighter and on a smaller time scale, and it can work. And look, if you talk, Sean Layden's on Twitter all the time, you don't have to spend 5-6 years.
But it's interesting. Do you think they've accidentally, ended up in a position where they're making the games that are dooms to no longer exist? These big blockbusters made by 1,000 people that have to sell 10 million to break even,
or more in some cases. I think those games do work, but they just, that's why. But they're having to put them on PC. Everyone talks about, it needs to keep the game on PS5. Don't release the game on PC. They have to put them on PC now, and they're IP expanding them. With the Last of Us TV show and all this kind of stuff. Like it does.
Surely that exposes their position even more, because and we were talking about this on the trip I've just been in Tokyo. Actually, the Last of Us series is easily going to overtake the game series in terms of timeline very quickly, because they're just not going to be able to get a Last of Us 3 out for maybe the next 5 years, even if they were working on it.
It's the Naughty Dog's Game of Thrones, isn't it? We'll finish it eventually. We'll have a different ending to the TV series. But that's the way, that's the thing. But then you look at, it's an IP business thing, right? And Nintendo's kind of the template for it. You mentioned it.
But the same thing again. You coming to the Nintendo thing is that what they do that Sony doesn't is that they don't go, right, well, here's this new like top-down Zelda game. It needs to be 100 hours long and look photorealistic and, just cost. They know where to just pump it out. Like they know what details matter and what don't. Like, I mean, I was speaking to Nico Dusant, who's Astro Bot creative director, and he mentioned this. He was saying one of the first things he noticed as a game creator when he played Tears of the Kingdom is, the big golem creatures, the guys made out of blocks. I don't know what they're called, but there's these big enemies. Like he said, it's immediately that if you ran, because they're physics objects, that if you ran away far enough, they just fall through the floor. The area would despawn and they'd fall through the floor, and then you could just go back and collect your stuff. And he's like, Nintendo clearly knew that, but they've just decided that it's not a big, that you triage all the time. You're making games right. It's an issue, but it doesn't. Our attention's better spent on the bits where people spend the majority of their time, rather than this thing that 0.1% of players will notice.
Yeah, I think Sony. You talked about something earlier, which is interesting. That PlayStation used to be an issue with, but PlayStation had to be mindful of other people, right? Because they're a platform, they're part of the ecosystem, right? So they make these sort of super high-end single-player action adventure games. Not many people are making those, and it's like that's their avenue, that's their thing. We talked before, I think, Andy, about the fact that Japan studio doesn't exist anymore, making those weird indie sort of style games. But for Sony, they're probably legitimately going, look, why would we're competing with indies? Why would we're better off supporting indies. And there's a certain element of PlayStation games are supposed to be that super high end, and when I interviewed Jim Ryan about 4 years ago, and I asked him about like what's going, he was talking about how can we make The Last of Us and Uncharted? How can we take those games from 15 million to 30 million to 50 million? That's what they want to do. They want to work out how to turn these franchises into something much, much bigger, rather than let's make them cheaper. Let's do them a little bit less, sure. But I know, and we always say like, we'd love to have these games out faster, but we also all have massive backlogs of games that we don't have time to play. So it's always it's a difficult. PlayStation's got the challenge there, but I mean, they're in a privileged position as well, right? They've got these, I know they did a thing where we don't have enough original IP, but they've got so many big games and so many great franchises. And they are in a position where they can go through a year like this year and probably next year where they don't have a lot of games because they've got a platform business that's so strong that they can coast off big third party games. This year's not been great for third party games either, so it's a bit of a weak year generally. But next year you look at the lineup from like Take Two and EA and Ubisoft, and you sort of go, well, actually, Capcom, Sony can take a bit of time off, whereas someone like Nintendo or Xbox is a little bit more reliant on their first party slate. They have to keep that cadence up.
You say it's a slow year, but the PlayStation have just released the Game of the Year, so I mean, how slow of a year can it be?
It's Game of the Year until Balatro comes out on mobile.
Speaking of PlayStation, they've started rolling out some 30th anniversary plans. In a very strange announcement, they announced that they're putting the digital soundtrack, a couple of digital soundtracks on streaming. If you think in the history of PlayStation franchises, what are the first 6 soundtracks you would put out for something like this? God of War, God of War 2, God of War Ghost of Sparta. Okay. Twisted Metal, Starhawk, and Unit 13.
Christ.
Unit 13, anybody? Unit 13?
It probably feels like that. Feels like a shit. The 30th anniversary is coming up, guys. Product publishing team. What have we got? We got what IP do we own that we own the music and this? Yeah, okay. That's an easy thing to scramble together, right? Do some soundtracks.
I mean, it's a weird situation because like I saw people being like, "Oh, why have they not put like The Last of Us and Horizon, all that and Return, all that stuff's been on streaming for ages. Like they've been putting all their soundtracks on streaming for a long time. So now it's just like, what is this old stuff? Like to me, Unit 13 is like an Astro Bot cameo, like a Unit 13 bot.
I
would pop up
literally
and you'd
would
be
not
like,
know what.
Oh my god, Unit 13! It's a Vita game.
I remember now, but
yeah.
I don't know what it looks like. Not a clue.
Just all they needed to do was a grey PlayStation 5.
Mate, they've got
it
to.
Takes more effort.
I'm convinced they've got to. I bet they do a grey PlayStation, or they'll do the wings. They'll do like grey wings for it, and surely they'll do a PlayStation 1 themed DualSense. That seems like the most.
That's the thing is that when I
world.
went to Asobi, they showed us the original pitch for Astro Bot. Like they took out the financial slides, but they showed us the slide. They went through the presentation and showed us this is the pitch we gave to PlayStation, and it was basically pitched as a 30th anniversary game. They had the release date now, like it's coming out September 2024, and they had a logo. Like you kind of see it. I mean, for people watching on video, it's like there's this logo with all of the characters on it, around Astro Bot, but it said PlayStation 30th anniversary on it. So that's what it was. So Astro Bot kind of is the 30th anniversary celebration. It's just for some reason they're not really branding it as such.
Well, I guess once it gets into the 31st anniversary, it becomes dated, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
There is an explicit 30th reference in the game, but it's the kind of thing that you'll only see if you're like me.
But I mean, even just like for a bit of
like
for Nintendo, they'll mark it like, oh, Mario 35th, and then they'll release a game with it. It's not got the branding all over it. It's just part of a marketing campaign.
Well, actually, the 2 times they did that for Mario 35th, they then discontinued the game by the time it got to the following March. Astrobot's interesting. I think that's going to be I think that might be a breakout hit.
It's going to be a hit, but it's to your point. It's the ceiling is where it is, right? I mean, it's not like to your tweet. It's like it's not a Spider-Man or a God of War or anything anywhere near that, right?
Unless it was on Switch, then I would say it has a chance.
Even if they did really, I mean, because there was some talk about would they put it on PC, and it would be a much worse game without the haptics, in my opinion. You look at the history of Sony have put like Ratchet and Clank and stuff like that on Steam, and they've just absolutely bombed. It just the audience is not the right there. Audience.
Yeah.
It's not the right audience. Those games they sell to PlayStation fans. Like Astro Bot, like day one, the PlayStation fans are coming out. And then when you get closer to Christmas, that's when you go, right, we're going to get the families and the parents and the kids to sort of get in on that. And that audience, they're a little bit more, price conscious, but it's more of a living room experience for them. It's more sort of hanging out with you.
It's a toy. It's a toy. It's a very Nintendo-like game. It's a toy. I could not imagine playing that without a DualSense. I mean, I knew the review code was coming in while I was in Japan visiting them. So I was like, oh, maybe I should get a PlayStation Portal. And then when it was pointed out to me, it didn't have any of the DualSense features. Oh, right, well, I'm taking my PS5 with me. That's why I hold it, to the other side of the world. That's how integral it is to the experience. You can't pull the haptics off of that game. It's designed around them, which they will. Of course, they'll do it anyway, and it won't be as good.
That's why
but
you
can play
the DualSense on
PC
with you.
Yeah,
your naked PlayStation 5 Pro.
I took the kind of, what do you even call them? The plates,
the wings,
but officially they've got
I think they're called side plates or something like that.
So I took them off. I was going to take my PS5 with me, so I wrapped it in a towel and all the rest of it in a suitcase. So I put I put a picture up when the code came in, because you're allowed to do that as part of the embargo. Like, I'll tell people. I thought it's quite cool. I'm in Tokyo. I'll take a picture, and just the speculation went mental. That's a PS5 Pro. Look, he's taken the plates off to hide it.
That's how they announced it, via your hotel room. Weirdly enough, on the PlayStation 5 Pro, they released a 30th anniversary wallpaper, and sure enough, there is a silhouetted image of a PlayStation 5 Pro right in there. So the speculation is this is getting announced within 10 to 15 days.
I still can't believe they're actually releasing this thing.
I want it. I'm ready for it.
But this is where the only... Oh, yeah, you get it. So you can make the game's a bit prettier.
Yeah.
I just don't... How are they even going to sell this thing? I just don't see it. Like, the price of... We're not in the PS4 generation anymore. The cost of the existing hardware is not going down. In fact, it's going up in a lot of markets. I was just, obviously, in Japan, and we went out for dinner with a load of, really old school, amazing Sega designers for a friend I know. And kind of Nico did Astro Bot came out as well. And they were talking, and a lot of them were like, oh, we're going to have to buy a PS5. And it was I noted to them that they just increased the price for the third time in Japan, the PS5 last week. It's gone up 80% since launch, the cost of a PS5. How much is this thing going to cost? It's going to be like a 600 quid at least
I bet
device.
It's 600 quid.
Without a disk drive. Without a disk drive.
Massively. Chris, how are they going to position this?
I position it for Jordans out there.
Yeah.
This is a super high end version. I don't think this isn't like the 4K days.
But I mean, there's 4K was a tangible, a selling point, right? 4K TVs had been popularized by that point. I just don't even like selling 2 Jordans. What, some more ray tracing? Don't care.
Hell yeah.
Well, I guess it's still the whole 60 frames per second and the full, that's the thing that the vision that they didn't achieve. And it will be for the hardcore people. I think the big play for more mainstream users will be handheld. I think Xbox is planning it. I think PlayStation must be going, how can we make a PS5 handheld right now? Because that's how you can. I think that's where you can widen the audience for those consoles at the moment is by following Nintendo like 8 years late. But it's for me that's the direction that the.
You know what they're going to do? I called it. They're going to do it. They're going to jump on board the current tech company buzzword, which is AI. And they're going to be, it has the power of AI. It's going to run, everything's going to run at 4K 60 because of AI. They're going to use like the super sampling or whatever, which has already existed in PS4 Pro and stuff like that. And they're going to rebrand it as, it's got AI. The AI is going to make your ray tracing better.
I mean, it really hit me this year reviewing Star Wars Outlaws. And it was like, we're back to the point where I'm picking performance or quality or this 40 FPS mode that's in the middle. I just want more juice in this hardware. Also, I mentioned it in our Slack. I've used this PS5 probably more than anyone on Earth. Like, it's on for about 10 hours every day since 2020. So mine is like fully goosed at this point. So I'm ready for a new one.
It just feels like another misstep to me. It feels like another PSVR 2. Like, we've just spent 20 minutes talking about how everything's not working because they're chasing fidelity and they can't afford to make games and bring them out. And it's like, we should release a more expensive machine to push that even further.
I think it's only a misstep if expectations are, if the expectation is that it's going to be like a massive mega seller. If they're sitting there going, we're going to create a higher end version of our hardware. So
I can't imagine they're releasing it thinking it's going to do crap.
No, but I mean,
but then again, they did just release Concord and then cancel it a week later. So who knows?
No, but I mean, it depends on if they're going. It depends on the expectations. If they're going, right, we're going to target a very specific audience with this, and it's this, and it's for the elite game. It's the PlayStation fans that have been playing this console a lot since and also there's also another element of this since 2020. If there's another element of this, which is like, how long is this generation now going to be? Now, I know that earlier when we were talking about during the court case of Activision Blizzard, it was supposed to be a 7-8 year journey, but we're not seeing the games are taking longer to come out. We're seeing so many gamers still on PS4 and Xbox One. Like, this is one of the slowest transitions we've ever seen in a console era. So you're going, actually, is this console generation going to be 7 years or is it going to be 8 years? Are we looking at a 10-year console generation? And if you're doing that, you kind of have to, juice up the hardware. I did see
some suggestion, and a lot of our kind of super hardcore Xbox listeners might be able to add to this in the comments. So I'm sure there was some stuff that came out of that Activision, the court documents about the next Xbox going for real like mobile parts, like ARM parts, like of just being more like off the shelf, and that might be the direction of travel, that actually they might be incentivized now to get off of this generation as quickly as possible and make cheaper machines that, to your point, they might be able to, turn into handhelds and actually might become cheaper to make over time. Like, maybe this generation was a misstep in that sense.
Well, the biggest issue they've got is all these gamers who are
these gamers. Just end it there.
These gamers who are playing this Warzone and Fortnite on their PS4s, and they've gone perfectly happy with this. I don't see the need to upgrade, and so they will do eventually.
Surely GTA 6 is the moment. Like,
yeah, I do.
Yeah, GTA. I'm convinced that when GTA 6 comes out, every PlayStation in the land will have GTA 6 on the box, and then people go into a shop and go, that's the GTA 6 machine. That's it.
Yeah.
So
unless Rockstar do something crazy like put it on Switch too, and then
what if they put it on PS4? What if they put an absolutely like hamstrung version of GTA 6 on PS4?
Over at that point.
Yeah. I think it's,
I'm more interested if they put it on PC. I can't. I'm still like, I'll be stunned if it's not on PC at launch. At this point.
Depends how much Sony paid for it.
Well, how much would they have to pay to make it worthwhile?
Concord $1 billion. That's where all the Concord money's going. They're like, it's going to make sure that
if you're anyone
GTA's
else, if you're
PS5.
any games publisher right now, and you have a game anywhere near the size of GTA, how long is that even crossing your mind? Maybe we shouldn't release it on PC. Even Sony are not releasing their games on PC.
Well, the thing is, Take-Two as an organisation will want people to transition now from their PS4s. Like 20, isn't it? I think it was Ampere said there's like 20 million active users on GTA Online, and the majority of them are on PS4.
Because Sony's
so
user base is literally 50-50 still.
Yeah,
it's 50 million.
So they want people off PS4 now. They want people dropping GTA Online on PS4, moving over to PS5, and.
But it's again like the conversation's going full circle. It's like a lot of these at this point in the generation. How much you had a cheap PS4, right? It was at a much more mass market price. That has not happened and will not happen. In fact, they're going to release an even more expensive one.
To be fair, this is what soft games company, every game does. It used to be a time, right, when you had like games would start off at 50 quid, and then they went down to, then they'll be in a platinum range or whatever for 20 quid by the end of the generation. The consoles go from like 250 quid to 100. But now instead of reducing the price, they update them. So that you look at, I thought it was fascinating. Somebody told me No Man's Sky, if you ignore it, it's on sale at the moment, but when it's not on sale, it has the same price today as it did in 2016. That's what its normal price is. And it's because the game is constantly updated. And it's the same with the hardware now, right? Instead, Nintendo hasn't lowered the price of the Switch. They just keep releasing new versions of it. And
I mean, I discovered that, like, when I went developer side for a couple of years, that was a big eye opener for me. Just how important, how much of a multiple people's full-time job that is, life cycle, right? Put it in sale for a bit, put the price back up, put it in sale for, like, you make way more money just selling constantly for X years afterwards on sales and keeping the price as high as you can than you do in that initial launch bit. Most people who, you know, kind of play games or are in the games fandom might think, like, you know, say for example, one of the Final Fantasy games that came out this year, they're done now. You know, they made their money at the start. No, they'll just be steadily selling. They do a sale, Steam sale, and then they do have a spike, and they, you know, put the price back up again. They'll make more money during that, over that life cycle.
Yeah.
Right?
For Remedy told me that they made more money from Control in its second year than it did in its first. Right. Or something like that. And it's just
that's why you look at indies and where they sign with so many of these indie publishers and stuff like that. That's why they're signing for the expertise in that, right? We're going to manage all your store stuff, and we're going to make you all this X money, you know, putting you in bundles, and, you know, Steam's
like a game. You know, even if your game sort of doesn't hit its targets, has a bad launch, it doesn't mean it's over. You've got a game to play to get it, you know, algorithms to play with and sales to pick around with. And this is so different to when like 10, 15 years ago, right? Where your game came out, you had a month to sell it, and then it was in the pre-owned bins and it was over, right? And that was, nowadays that isn't the case, but there's a lot more competition. So it is hard.
Okay. When we come back, it's the moment you've been waiting for. Hello, Reddit / gaming leaks and rumors. It's Nintendo Switch 2 talk. We'll see you in a minute. And we are back. Check out patreon.com/Video Games Chronicle for more podcasts, more videos, and more of our nonsense. Me and Chris are going to do a video where we go through all of the cameos in Astro Bot and just wax lyrical, because there's some of them that are Unit 13 level nerdy, and I really appreciated that. So some weird omissions in there, Chris. There's I pointed out I was on FPS this week, and I pointed out that 3 of the main roster in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale have fallen so far out of favor that they don't make it as cameo appearances in Astro Bot. Also, there's a lot of third parties in there. What do you think the business was like behind that? Because there's like Capcom characters and all that kind of thing. Do you think it was just a case of going to them and being like, can we please use this character? Or do you think did money change hands?
No, I think I actually asked. I'm trying to remember the answer, because I spoke to Nico at Summer Games Fest and I asked him about this, and a lot of people came to them.
Oh, really?
And said, yes, please, we'd love to have your game in this. But yeah, maybe they got a few no's. I think
they got a very, very huge, substantial no that I text Andy about, and I was like, how cover your ears for the next 3 seconds if you don't want to hear the name of a company that does not feature an Astro Bot. 3, 2, 1, Square Enix. There is no characters from them in Astro Bot, despite them having 2 exclusive games on the PS5 right now.
And there's some very, very niche, deep cuts, cameos in this game. It is not that is not being overlooked. You know, that it could not be clearer that Square Enix have just said, nah.
Which is weird because they're in Playroom. Like, there's a direct reference in Playroom.
I mean, Smash Brothers.
Yeah. I wonder.
Maybe they wanted some money and they were like going, no.
Unless
we're not paying you for this. This is marketing for your game, and that's where things sort of get. That's where often you find.
I mean, the people. There's a big thing about their. You know, the when I was speaking to the studio, the team there, because they're so small in context for a AAA studio, 65 people. They're telling me about their hiring process and how their hiring process takes ages, because they're like they look at personality as much as they do ability. Because in how they work, you need to have take on board a lot of feedback on your work and stuff and iterate quickly. And you can't have people with egos who can't take criticism on board and blah, blah, blah. So sort of like building an amazing first 11, you know, rather than like a Chelsea-esque just piling on of like good individuals. They're a very like cohesive team. And a lot of that was like, they have to be game-minded people. Like you'll see, like the prototypes they make is mad. Like they'll take a post-it note and then one person will make a working, and it's basically done. Like I was shown a boss fight they made in 2 weeks. One person made in 2 weeks from a post-it note idea, and it was basically finished.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I'll see the art pass wasn't there, and they'd tweak things like difficulty and whatever, but it was like shockingly close to what ended up in the final game. So when it comes to like cameos and stuff like that, this game is made by people who love all those games. You know, they are big, you know, fanboys of all of this stuff. And you can see it. It rubs off when you play the game. It's a celebration of PlayStation because they love all these PlayStation games. And so I don't, it's not when stuff like that is not missing, it's not a mistake.
Yeah. Nico, I mentioned this elsewhere. Nico did an interview with Ben Hansen and MinMax, and he said that there was 5 to 10 characters that he was told no. So you imagine that.
That'll be like Cloud, Sephiroth,
Spider-Man. There's no Spider-Man, but there is Unit 13 tier cameos, but no Unit 13, sadly.
So I got one yesterday that was just a small bug. What's that supposed to be?
Is it not? Is it Mr. Mosquito?
What's that?
Oh, you don't know Mr. Mosquito? Come on, now, Andy. You're showing yourself up. Mr. Mosquito was a PS2 game where you play a mosquito, funnily enough.
Wow, that sounds shit.
It's Mr. Mosquito. It was a...
Right, so he made it in, but not
developed by Zoom.
I remember that game.
Yeah. It was Mr. Mosquito in Power Regions, and in Japan it's just known as Ka. Released in June 2001. So
yeah, they don't have any quality control on these cameos. They really don't. Like they've just bashed in anyone who said yes.
Stop slagging off Mr. Mosquito.
Yeah, come on.
That is...
You're going to get the Mr.
No,
Mosquito.
There's games I
maniacs.
like that have made it in there that I was thinking, really?
There's so many. I've gone on about the PS3 at length.
I'm surprised that
PS3.
Ukulele hasn't made it in there, to be honest. Like some of these cameos, I'm waiting for them to pop out.
There's so much PS3 representation of games that you cannot play on the PS5. And I'm like, give us a new Killzone. Anyway, people are screaming at the top of their lungs now. Chris Dring, what's going on with the Switch 2? They revealing it this month? Is it happening?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Right, folks. Patreon.com/Video Games Chronicles. See you next time.
I don't know. I sort of.
You two can't stop tweeting about it, and now it's getting plastered all over the internet. There's rumors swirling, and you two are the swirlers.
I said there's a bit of that.
You've shined a spotlight onto something that is not supposed to have a spotlight shined on it, Jordan.
Me?
Was actually just trying.
You two, the ones that have done it.
But this is the thing. This is the modern one. And Chris will have the same mindset as me, right? Like I started writing on magazines, right? We're magazine people, okay? In our generation, if it's not in print, it's not important. It's off the record chit chat. When I put stuff onto Twitter, and I've learned the hard way in the past, and Chris has as well. You just put something, just thing I've heard on social media, and it goes, people are like, that's gospel. And they hold you to it. I get held all the time for, you said this thing on Twitter might happen, and it didn't happen. It's like, well, but if I didn't write a news story about it, I'm not putting my flag in the sand. I'm not saying this is a thing. That's not me placing my big bet. That's me having 4 pints and tweeting,
That's me sitting around going to Gamescom and having some chats with people, and they're going, "Oh, I heard they might be announcing Switch this month." "Oh, really? Who'd you hear that from?" "Just my mate at Devolver." "Oh, okay." And so, I heard they might be announcing Switch this month. So I go, "There's a bit of whispers going on that Switch might be announced this month." "Oh, God, Switch is being announced."
We sound like we're wheeling it back, right? But now, obviously, we need to talk about it. But because of it's
could happen.
I look. If I was anywhere near above even 50% certain that it was going to happen, it would be a news story on our website. I wouldn't be wasting this stuff for Twitter, because the other thing is and this, I don't think this is how Chris thinks, but certainly it's how I think. It's like, well, usually if you're working on a story, other journalists working on a story, so I put it on social media, I'm basically just giving someone else the story, right, to scoop me. It's I've heard from like there's 3, 4, 5 different journalists independently now who I've spoken to who have all heard maybe something is happening in September. I would not bet my house on it. Like I said, it's, I don't know, like the way they usually have a direct before TGS. That is very traditional. The Nintendo always have a direct before TGS. They announced the first Switch in October. However, I think from what the reporting is now and from what I've heard that Switch 2 might not launch as early in the year as Switch, like March. It might be like April, May, something like that. So maybe that doesn't necessarily line up in terms of like when they would show it. But I don't know, maybe the thing about Nintendo is that it's a complete mugs game, as we've seen time and time again, doing any kind of like reporting, like authoritative reporting on timing, because those are the things that change the most and can change at last minute and have done. We've seen instances in the past where they delayed a direct because the Queen died, right? They can change stuff like that at a moment's notice, and they will do that. They usually do something for TV, but the thing that makes me doubt it is that they got the Nintendo Museum is opening on the 1st or 2nd, I think it is, of October, and they'll have some activity around that with like people going to see the museum probably and things like that. So I'd be kind of surprised if they did those things at the same time.
It depends. I guess there's an element from a business perspective. I know they want to get third parties on board and stuff like that. And if they want to do that in a more public way, they might want to announce. But
I mean, they definitely do think like that, right? They definitely is part of their thinking when they're like, well, TGS is coming out and we would like to speak to partners about this more openly. So that is part of their thinking when they're announcing stuff, right?
I'll tell you, I might have told this story in this podcast before, but before I joined Games Media, it was the year before the Wii was announced. And Nintendo team at the time wanted the new, I used to work on a weekly retail title, weekly magazine called MCV. And they wanted to get on the cover the announcement of the Wii. But the announcement was happening like Wednesday morning and the magazine went to press Tuesday afternoon or something
Can I just big up your story? This story is just a perfect encapsulated, anecdote about how they can change things and how many people will kind of point at journalists and you said this and it didn't happen. It's not an excuse. We're not covering our asses. Stuff will change. It's why so many press are hesitant to go, it's going to happen this month. I mean, you've seen like so many times in the past, they're going to announce this game and they don't. Anyway, sorry, carry on. I'm digressing.
Well, this is exactly the story. Nintendo gave the editor of the title at the time the new information. It came from Nintendo. It was going to cost this much. It was going to be, I can't remember, it might be bundled with Wii Play. I can't remember what the exact story was, or Wii Sports wasn't in it. I can't remember the exact details, but basically they went, it's going to cost this amount and this is available separately and this is available in a bundle or whatever. They put it on the cover, and when the Wednesday announcement happened, that wasn't the price. That wasn't the bundle. Right? And the editor turned to Nintendo, the PR person that handled it, and just went, sorry. It was like, it just changed. So, and I've had it before where I announced what's the second PS Vita, the PS Vita Slim. I was given that a heads up on that announcement, and I had that in MCV had a cover magazine, and the price was £20 cheaper than the price he told me, because it had changed in like 24 hours from the moment he told me it and when the announcement was made. I was given a load of information about, again, PlayStation, Gamescom announcements at PlayStation. I was given the full press release of everything they were announcing so I could get it on the cover of my magazine. And 3 of the games that were in there didn't end up getting announced. There were small games, like things you hadn't heard of. But that happens all the time. So, even if, and I wouldn't be surprised, Nintendo, is if it did leak out that they were going to announce a Switch 2 this month, I might just be spiteful and go, no.
That is the sort of thing they do. Well, that's maybe not on that level, but
yeah. Well, yeah. So it's I'm certainly not. I wouldn't put money on it being announced this month, but
when stuff like this pops up, you two, how can an informed reader, parse what is speculation and what is people that probably know things that are pointing?
I think most of the time, if it's speculation, I explicitly say this is speculation, because I automatically assume as a journalist that if I say something like that they're going to assume that I've heard it from someone. So, when I replied to Chris, I said, this is, something that a lot of journalists are hearing. I wouldn't bet on it. If it was speculation, I would say it's speculation. I
did use the word whispers. I thought I was being quite, I thought it was a clear indication that it's just people gossiping. Is it, it's like there's so many things that we hear about Switch 2. We've heard it's a dual screeny type product that might, whether it's actually 2 screens or the screen and the TV or a sort of thing. We've heard all this stuff from down stuff. But again, I haven't heard it in a way that made me go, I'm putting this in print. And that's it's
Switch 2 launch game. Concord, you've heard it here first. Get that reported. It's coming back as a Switch 2 exclusive. Okay, we have a lot of questions because you two are on, so let's get some of them now. If Cyanide 1980 from the Discord asks, if Asobi put you an Astro Bot, what would your power / ability be? I feel like I would pull out some kind of Astro Bot themed energy drink and it would make me move at 3 times speed. Chris, what would yours be?
Oh God. Something numbers related, I guess. I put out a calculator and work out, I don't know, and make a prediction that involves me falling off the platform. I don't know.
Andy would pull out his phone and then suddenly all the secrets of the level would reveal themselves, and he would just get 5 drinks in him and tweet, "Oh, there's a puzzle piece behind this wall I'm hearing." I think. Or Andy, would yours be some kind of hammer, some kind of big?
I gotta be completely
hammer?
honest. I got an important email while you were asking that question. I didn't hear it at all, so I don't know what you're talking about.
What would your power be if you were an Astro Bot power up?
Oh, are there Astro Bot power ups? Oh, you mean like the little backpack thing?
Yeah, the little dog and the monkey. It's called Big Hands. I appreciated that.
I'd make some friends.
That doesn't sound like you at all. You would
make some new friends.
Okay. Okay, from Shodan, what do you make of San Marino winning 1-0 and getting their first win in 20 years, Andy?
Did they win?
Yeah.
Who did they beat?
They won last night. I've absolutely no idea. I was not
like
provided with
Northampton
that information.
Town or something?
San Marino. Fuck, I've just searched San
They're
Marino.
They're gonna have a parade for that, right?
San Marino wins first time, and they beat Liechtenstein. So a real titan of the football.
I'm surprised.
They've won more games than Man United.
That seemed destined to go to West Ham United. That title, San Marino, West Ham United. Congratulations to them.
Yeah, all the San Marinian listeners, of which I've heard there are thousands. I assume they're pretty happy with that. This question again from Shodan. Do you think that the reaction to Concord is a flashpoint from fans because they feel that Sony have been coasting this past generation, Chris?
I do. Well, I do think. I don't think you've got this situation. Everyone likes big PlayStation games. PlayStation fans, love those big PlayStation games. There hasn't been one. There's been Spider-Man 2 as last real major one of that type that people like. There wasn't, but even then before then, it'd been like a year since the previous one. and we don't really know what they've got coming up, right? They haven't given us much. Normally we know, it used to be a time we knew PlayStation's lineup for the next 5 years. We don't know what they've even got next year. And so I think if you're a PlayStation fan, you love those PlayStation games, it's really frustrating right now. If you've got Astro Bot, which is great, but when your lineup is Concord and you know about Fair Games, and you know about Marathon, and you're like, yeah, Carl, where's the next Horizon? Where's the next God of War? Where's my Days Gone? Where's my Ghost of Tsushima? And where's my Wolverine? And it's sort of a bit quiet from them. And I think it can be quite frustrating to fans. And I think we are seeing that a little bit in the reaction to Concord.
Because I think the model's kind of like, it's like coming back to the Xbox thing last week, we were saying where what's happening with them is sort of like I don't want to use the word betrayal, but when you buy a console, you are like entering that silent agreement, right? That I'm paying for this thing and there's not going to be much on it at the start. And you're going to reward me with all these unique experiences that I've, for investing in this console. And that's kind of what people expect when they pay 500 quid for a console. And now they're finding out that, oh, that's not really, what we're getting anymore.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think the majority of people buy consoles not for Spider-Man and God of War, but for Call of Duty and Final Fantasy and Resident Evil and Monster Hunter and all those sort of things. I think we fixate in the sort of console war rhetoric around exclusives, and I think from a PlayStation fan perspective, it is a bit quiet on PS5 this year generally. I think, but and PlayStation's first party lineup doesn't help with that. But as I say, like if next year's a bit quiet for PS5 first party games, I don't think it's a problem, right? When you've got Borderlands 4 and Monster Hunter Wilds and GTA 6 and so yeah, but I do think if you are into those games and you're a real big fan of Sony's PlayStation Studios titles, those first couple of years were great, right? That launch lineup was fantastic, and went to Ratchet and Clank, and then there was Returnal, and then there was Horizon and God of War and Gran Turismo. It was fantastic first couple of years, and it's just the next couple of years has been really quiet.
How much of that is the pandemic?
We're seeing the pandemic impact there. The consistency is really off, and it's oddly reversed for Xbox. Xbox had a really terrible first couple of years, and now it's sort of picking up for them. And I can imagine it's frustrating, particularly when PlayStation fans want to hear about this, and Sony's made the decision not to tease games too early, and that's their strategy now. But it can be quite frustrating if you're really into that game, I think. And I suspect that's part of the reason why people are so angry with the existence of Concord. Like I see a lot of people going, I did a tweet that said, it's not a win that this game failed. And it's always a win. It tells Sony that they should stop making these games. The studio didn't exist. Sony bought this studio. This studio this studio wasn't making Uncharted 5, right? They were always, this is a team that makes these sort of games. They bought that team. It hasn't taken away from the type of games that you want, but they want those games, and Sony isn't talking about them at the moment.
I actually wanted to ask this, see both of your thoughts. The stuff in Astro Bot made me think like PS4 was and a lot of these franchises were established on PS3, but to me it's strange that the last Uncharted game was Uncharted 4 on the PS4, and that series is seemingly gone dormant, but it's still something that they use as like, here is one of our tentpoles. Chris, do you feel like there would be some motivation within Sony to just be like, we own a lot of studios, let someone else make Uncharted? Or do you think Naughty Dog's like putting the kibosh on that?
Andy might know this better than me, but I thought there was a new studio they built to make a new Uncharted. I might be getting that wrong, like in Santa Monica or something like that. I thought that was being worked on, but these games take forever, right? That's the thing. Like, when was Uncharted 4 actually? Was it
2016 or something like that?
2016.
Allegedly, that's what they were doing with, is it Visual? Something Visual?
So like Visual Arts Group?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, like some department, and they were trying to get Bend involved after
Days Gone.
Days Gone. There was a couple of Bloomberg reports about that, but I can't honestly. It seemed to go backwards and forwards. The updates on that, but they are working on it. They're not working on it. Are working on it, but I mean, let's make no mistake. They're working on an Uncharted game. There's not a world where Sony doesn't have someone working on an Uncharted game.
And they gave us a movie.
And I seem to remember that did all right. They're doing another one. I think they are. They're doing a sequel.
Yeah.
I thought that was not offensive. I mean, I know our expectations for these are on the floor, but I thought it was all right.
Yeah, I thought it was okay.
I mean, he's one of the few people, Tom Holland, who can carry a movie these days as well.
Yeah. So I was these games just take a long time, but like I always point out things like Ken Levine skipped an entire generation. That's the world it's been, when Grand Theft Auto comes out, Grand Theft Auto 6, it'd been 12 years since we had GTA 5. It's and I know there were games made in between, but it's weird, right? You see in movies when they have a hit movie franchise, even TV show, but even in that world, right? The idea of a TV show getting a new series every year is not as common as it used to be, right? And even the idea of getting a sequel to a movie every couple of years, even if things like a Mario movie, you think, right, that's been a massive hit. Let's quickly turn out another one for 2025, but they won't have. And it's just these things are taking a lot longer to pull off and make happen. But we live in this attention economy situation where there is so much stuff for people to play, watch, and do that there's almost not really a rush for it.
I was more thinking in terms of like Sony's IP lineup, because the kind of splash screen at the start of the Sony games, like their version of the Marvel logo, is all stuff that was big on PS4. It's like Horizon, Uncharted, Ghost of Tsushima, like that.
Yeah, you bet your ass those IPs are all being worked on.
But where's the new?
Well, the new
PS5
stuff was supposed to be
the
new stuff was supposed to be all of the live service games that have canned off, right?
Oh yeah,
the new one was
Johnny
Concord,
right? And Johnny Fair game getting in there.
That's what it was supposed to be. I mean, but I suppose that's not so much an issue for them, right? Is that once you have all those IP, I mean, look, a lot of companies would love to have those IPs. They don't need. Do they need any more? I mean, I know there's Sony.
I do find it quite funny though. I'm on podcasts all the time, but they will get really annoyed that their IPs they leave dormant. They don't support them anymore, and they're also really angry they're not making new IP. And it's like, there's only so much resource. And it's Returnal was new one, wasn't it?
I mean, I think Returnal is the second best game on PlayStation 5, but that is not a game that Astro Bot. But that is not a game that blew the doors off for people. So yes, I'm in the camp where the reason I got so into Sony and the PS3 generation, and not just because I'd red ringed so many Xboxes that I got like insanely angry about it, was because of all these new single player titles. And I'd love a new Infamous, and I'd love a new Killzone and all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, I thought it was really exciting in the PS4 gen when it was like, Days Gone's a shit game, but they tried it. Ghost of Tsushima, a new thing. Horizon, a new thing. I would just like to see them come out.
And you've just reminded me how rubbish PlayStation US's IP was. Like pre-Uncharted, like it was just awful, right?
Resistance, bring back Resistance. Come on.
The Order 1666 was that
1886.
18. Sorry.
What? Yeah.
Another character. There's no the Order reference in Astro Bot, but I wonder, maybe Radiate Dawn, God rest them, owned that IP. I don't know how that worked, but there's no. Chris, if you can name one of the characters from Radiate Dawn's The Order 1886, I will send you £5.
Oh no,
Andy,
Victorian man.
Andy, the name of the main character from The Order 1886.
Ooh. Gerald.
The game was about 3 hours long, wasn't it?
It was Galahad was the name of the main character. Look, The Order 1886 was obviously a bad game, but they had a gun that if you shot Mercury or some kind of element, the visual effect was unbelievable, and that was like that works for me.
It's really like cool, unique setting as well. Yeah. In a time where every game seems to have the same setting, the same brown post-apocalyptic world.
We're honestly in the generation of complete revisionist history where people are pretending that the prequels are good. We're getting close to the point where people are like, "Oh, The Order 1886 was fantastic."
What I will say is that I'm like this. Like, I loved these PlayStation games. I loved it. The unfinished Swans and the Reigns of the world as well. But these games do still exist. They're just made by these. We use the word indie a lot, but they're made by these smaller teams that are making these sort of sometimes weird, sometimes different stuff. And the big guys, because the risks are so high and the costs are so much bigger now. There used to be a time PlayStation used to make Invisibles. Do you remember Invisibles?
Yeah, Invisibles. Come on,
that's where you
that
tell
game
this
existed.
Story.
Yeah, that game existed because it's popular in Spain. That was the reason why it was good. Now you can't release, you can't have a franchise. Sony can't put all their efforts and money into a game because it's big in one market anymore. They can't do that. But there are other companies who are smaller, where they're, their budgets are different and their scale is different, who can do that. And there are so many games being released all the time. I think perhaps it's okay for a company like Sony or whatever not to play in that field anymore. It's just a bit of it. We just miss it, don't we? We're old. We're like, remember the good old days.
Why is there not a current SingStar game on the PlayStation 5? Come on now. I know that's
because they closed the studio behind it.
That's often the answer when it's like this weird British shit. It's like, because they're dead. Sad times. Chris, this is an important question from Kel Lind. Do you prefer Monster Ultra Fiesta Mango or Monster Ultra Peachy Keen?
I'm a Dr. Pepper obsessive, and a comedian once described it as the tasting like a sexy battery, which for me is like is exactly what a Dr. Pepper is. I love drinking sexy batteries. So that's my. It's not really an energy drink; it's just a fizzy drink, but I like it. A
really nice cold Dr. Pepper is good. I can't remember what. Oh, it was when we went to Firaxis a couple of years ago. They just had a big vat of like ice cold American sodas, and I was just drinking different ones every time I went up, and my stomach felt absolutely terrible after that. Because that's the real shit. Final question. Nathan Zur asks, how does Andy have so many connections in the industry? Is he blackmailing them?
Most people just like to drink beer.
Yeah.
It's a secret. A open secret that most people like to drink beer. And
games developers hate this one weird trick. Give them beer.
Give them beer.
Well, you've also got that dossier though, Andy, don't you? On everybody, you know all their secrets.
That's why I work for so cheap, because I can't let the truth out. Yeah, it's just
that's why I'm on this podcast before my own company's podcast.
Every time I see a clip of you and Batch on Twitter, I'm like, what's he said now? What is this getting clipped out of context of you being like, I've heard the Xbox is actually going to get cancelled. Phil Spencer's going to get marched out.
There was almost went on about Black Myth Wukong, and that's the name of the game, isn't it? The game, and everyone said, why is it not on Xbox? And I made a comment about the time. I think I told the story before at GDC. Loads of people were talking about the fact that there's loads of people, a couple of developers talking to me about. Sometimes I wonder if there's any point in releasing a game on Xbox. Yeah, and which is we all make mistakes.
Especially the way you say things, it's just so cold and cutting. It's just like, what's the fucking point of putting things on Xbox? They've not sold an Xbox in mainland Europe in about 10.5 years, so let's just get rid of it.
The thing is, like, even my point was, like, even the Xbox has an audience, right? But like, so much of them are on Game Pass. And if you're not releasing a game that isn't like FIFA or GTA or Assassin's Creed, whatever, it's difficult to do decent numbers on it. And some people are like, it was a conversation at GDC, and for some reason I shared it. And when people were saying, why do you think Black Myth's not on an Xbox? I said, is there a platform deal? There may well have been, but part of me's like, maybe they're just like, it's like, what's the point?
Yeah. Then the Xbox client media is absolutely tearing their hair out, going, it's actually fine. I went into a Slovakian game station and there was 300 Xboxes there. It's all good.
It doesn't feel like they're particularly pushing hard in Europe anymore, does it?
Well, here's the thing. Actually, I will say this. I just did a piece. Gamescom. It was brilliant. Like, I genuinely, Xbox, for example.
Their booth looks amazing. I didn't.
And all the games, not all the games, but like most of the developers there were European developers, right? And you forget that, and I know that there's a lot of people. The platform fans won't like it. But for the first time, Xbox felt a little bit more relevant in Europe because they had Indiana Jones and it was coming to PS5. And for a lot of console players in Europe, Indiana Jones is now a game that's on our radar. It wasn't on our radar before because it was on Xbox. And that pivot towards, multi-platform pivot they're making. And so they had games like, 2 Point Museum was on their booth and had all this sort of stuff. And suddenly it just felt like they've always used Gamescom as a way to push. Sorry, we're completely changing topic. To push games like Halo Wars, because they feel like Europeans love strategy games. So they're right, they do. But this time I saw Xbox felt European. It just felt like there was a bit of a European business there, and because they weren't about that box that nobody owned in Europe, they were about PC. They've been about PC for a while now, but they were really, really about that. And having Blizzard there, Diablo and Warcraft, these big sort of games that are very popular in mainland Europe, like it felt like, wow, this is an Xbox trying its best to win over European fans and failing. It's like they've got that audience now, and they're talking to them directly. It's good.
Diablo, not Diablo.
Sorry.
It's a special European version of the game. I said that was the last question, but this is too important. Speaking of Xbox client media, Danielle Partis asks for Chris, if you had to murder Andy, how would you do it? Caveat, cannot be the same way you'd murder Spatch, which is James Batchelor, for those that aren't aware.
I'm not sure I answered Daniel. I may have answered Daniel's question about Spatch. I'm trying to remember how I said I'd kill him. I don't know. Andy,
Andy's staring you down. He's taking notes here how he's going to retaliate.
I think way it would probably happen is it would happen over an argument about Rare. That tends to be where the two of us get most heated, and there'll be he'll tell me Conker's shit or something, and I'd knife him. But but if I was trying to be this a little bit more calculated, I guess, I don't know, spike his beer or something. I don't know. Sorry, Dan, I need to think of something more inventive.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I'm slowly murdering him by attrition every time I forget to add a tag to a story, or
which is every time.
Don't embed a video. It's taken like 0.1%. It's like, what's the name of Peter Molyneux's fucking mental game where you would tap the curiosity?
Yeah,
it's like
curiosity.
that. I'm just tapping away at him, and eventually I'll hit that moment and his head will fucking explode. But until then, we have the VGC podcast. Thank you very much for listening to this bumper edition in which the Switch 2 was confirmed. I'm hearing that the review will be up my arse. Until next week, remember to subscribe to the channel. Any questions, comments, or concerns to patreon.com/videogameschronicle. You can join our Discord. You can have some fun. You can enjoy bonus videos, more podcasts, and I want to point this out. We have a hell of a lot of Astro Bot coverage. We have the review roundtable, and an extended feature that Andy wrote during his time at Team Asobi. There is also some exclusive video from inside Team Asobi full of secrets. They confirm Astro Bot 2. Chris, what are you up to this weekend? Are you botting? Are you Astro Botting?
I am playing Astro Bot, but I'm really hooked on Pikmin 4. It's taken me a long time to get to this. And I think it was the best game Nintendo released last year.
Then you'll love Astro Bot then. It basically is half Pikmin game.
So I'm right near the end of it, so I'm going to finish Pikmin 4. But it's my little one's my 4-year-old is going to school for the first time next week, and we're going to treat him and have a nice final end of the summer with him this week.
Are they into games?
Not yet. Oddly, I've tried Astro Bot. I thought, brilliant. I'm going to plug Astro Bot in, and the kids will sit there and they'll play it with me. One of them's 2, so he'll get a bit bored, but the 4-year-old might be into it. But no, he sort of watched it for a bit, thought it looked cute, and then ran away and started, playing with Batman toys. So I haven't got them into games yet, which
what a failure! What an absolute disappointment. Show them the references to fucking Devil Dice, and then they're like, "Oh, now we're talking." Back when games were games, references to the Net Yarosi. Andy, big weekend ahead?
Big Astro Bot weekend. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I've got another secret game as well that I'm going to play.
Secret game. Do I know about
this? It's a Switch 2 game.
Do I know about this?
Secret...
Do I know what it is?
No, you don't know what it is. No.
That'll have to change. I'll have to fucking change. I think I'm also playing a secret game, but it's probably not exciting.
Can you give me like a clue? Can you give me like an echo of what it might be?
Oh yeah, give us it.
It breaks the NDA.
Let's just guess. I'm actually going to play more of basketball themed betting app NBA 2K25, which is a real you think things are bad, you should put your eyes on NBA 2K25, a game that seemingly has 4 concurrent battle passes every season. It's really plumbing the depths, which is a shame because the basketball's pretty good. Anyway, we're getting out of here. Until next time, say goodbye, Chris.
Goodbye.
Say goodbye, Andy.
Goodbye.
I'm going out on the piss with Chris Scullion and Kez McDonald tonight, so more full pay to you.
Oh, Keza shows me an email.
She owes you an email? Okay. Andy, any messages for Kez McDonald?
She owes me a meal.
Okay.
3 beers.
Okay, well, if Kez McDonald owes you anything, let us know. Until then, see you later.